Hi, welcome to my channel VGCBSE Academy. If you like this video, please like, subscribe and comment. If you need one-on-one sessions, please mail me to vgirija45@gmail.com. My contact number is 9535609928. Previously, you have seen particularly about the clause and phrases, coordinating main clause, subordinate clause, coordinate clause, etc. Let's have a recap of the clauses. What's a principal clause or a main clause? Which makes a good sense and has a complete meaning, which stands by itself as a complete sentence. For example, I cannot work. Now let's look at the dependent or subordinate clause. Dependent or subordinate clause depends on the principal clause, that is the main clause in a sentence for its complete meaning. Subordinate clause, it is incomplete in the meaning and cannot stand by itself. It is introduced by the conjunctions such as because, as, since, than, though, if, that, etc. Not only that, but relative pronouns and relative adverbs such as when, which, where, who, that, etc. For example, I cannot work while you are talking. So I cannot work is a main clause while you are talking. So while you are talking is a dependent clause which depends on when you cannot work. So it depends on the main clause. Now let's look at the coordinate clause. It has an equal status with main clause, which is introduced by coordinating conjunctions such as and, but, so, or otherwise. For example, he sells books and he earns his living. Let's split this into he sells books, which is a main clause, has a complete meaning. He earns his living. It's also a main clause. It is also having a complete meaning. Now, when you combine these two with the conjunction and, it gives as a coordinate clause. He sells books and he earns his living. Let's do some exercises on what you have understood about independent clause and dependent clause or a subordinate clause. Look at the sentences. Now try to identify the independent clause and dependent clause. Check with the definitions which you have learned previously. Click on to the next slide if you need the answers. Look here. After we finish the meeting is a dependent clause since it is not making a complete sense and it cannot exist independently. Ira went to see her is an independent clause, that is a main clause or a principal clause which has a complete meaning. While we are playing, it is a subordinate clause. Since we went yesterday, it is a dependent clause or a subordinate clause because it is starting with I read the book which was taken as a movie. I read the book is a main clause, whereas which was taken as a movie is a dependent clause. The kid who was peeping in the window has left the letter. So who was peeping in the window is a dependent clause since it is not making complete sense and cannot exist independently. She enjoys dancing in the rain is a independent or a principal or a main clause as it makes complete sentence and complete sense and it can stand by itself independently. The novel which was on the desk is brilliantly written. Which was on the desk is a dependent clause. Since the play was fascinating, this is a dependent clause or a subordinate clause. If we come back on time, this is a dependent clause since it is not making complete sense and cannot exist independently. Let's have a recap with the phrase independent clause and dependent clause. Look at the exercises and identify and determine whether it is a phrase or independent clause or a dependent clause. Come on, let's look at the answers. The first one, throwing sheets on the roads, is a phrase which does not have a subject or a verb. While stones covered the street is a dependent clause, as it is not making a complete sense independently. Nobody resides there is an independent clause because it makes sense on its own. Besides old cars and bikes, it's a phrase. It does not have the subject or a verb. Unless it snows, it is an dependent clause as it is not making complete sense and it is starting with unless. Swimming can be fun is an independent clause as it makes a complete sentence and sense and can stand of its own. That we purchased yesterday is a dependent clause. Which disappeared is a dependent clause. It's not making and it has to depend on something it cannot stand independently. Walk fast is a independent clause or a main clause because it makes complete sense and it can stand of its own. To jump quickly is a phrase. It does not contain a subject or a verb. Let's have a quick recap with the underline the following sentences. Underline the dependent clause and the subordinating words. I am particular here, subordinating words of the subordinating clause, which is the subordinating word. Click on to the next slide if you need the answers and to check your answers whether it is right or wrong. In the first sentence, I said no to the party because I had some pending work. Here, because is a subordinating word for the dependent clause because I had some pending work. I said no to the party is the main clause. In the second sentence, if is the subordinating word for the dependent clause if I had studied properly. Here, I could have passed brilliantly is the main clause. After is the subordinating word for the dependent clause. After I complete my assignment is in the third sentence and is a subordinating clause. I will get the offer for work is a main clause. In the fourth sentence, while is the subordinating word for the dependent clause while he was sleeping. And they were playing video games is the main clause. Fifth sentence, if is the subordinating word for the dependent clause if she would have written the stats. And the main clause is her project would have been brilliant. The sixth sentence, unless is a subordinating word for the dependent clause unless you return the book. You will have to clear all the dues is a main clause. Seventh sentence, if is the subordinating word for the dependent clause if it is pleasant tomorrow. Again, this is depending on we will go shopping. This is the main clause. I thought that she was going to stay with us in the eighth sentence. That is the subordinating word for the independent clause that she was going to stay with us. The ninth sentence, you can't achieve your goal when you are unfocused. You can't achieve your goal is a main clause. And when is the subordinating word for the dependent clause? When you are unfocused. 10th sentence, he took his toy although he preferred reading books. So he took his toy is a main clause. Although is the subordinating word for the dependent clause, although he preferred reading books. Hope you have done well and you have understood the concept of it. More and more to come with more exercises and understanding the concepts. Thank you once again. Welcome to my channel, VG CBSE Academy. You can just like, subscribe, and leave your comments on this. Thank you very much.